SCP-6959, A Very Strange Fumo, written by Mr. Bones Wild Ride. I apologize for this coming out later than announced. Due to interferences outside of my control, I couldn't release this on time, but let's not delay this any further. Last year, in July of 2023, I released a video intended to be an April Fool's special of sorts, that was also released late due to similar circumstances. Since I could not figure out how to make something remotely funny, I felt that it would be a better use of my time to give my opinion over a somewhat heated dispute over a certain silly-looking SCP. The results of that video were actually decent, but there were a few things that I felt could have been communicated better, particularly the part that responds to the criticisms of this SCP received at the time. Nonetheless, I still stand by my intended opinion of that version of the SCP. I originally intended this video to be a remake, but I think it serves better as a sequel. I'll save my opinion on both this SCP and more presently relevant criticisms of this SCP for later in the video. But before we go on, I really would recommend reading this SCP on your own, but I will do it anyway since I did it last time. Without further ado, let's get onto this SCP. First, let's go over whatever changes there were from last time. SCP-6959 is a safe class object, meaning that it has a reliable way of containing. To contain SCP-6959, it must be suspended by 2 electromagnets in a vacuum-sealed chamber, with inspections being made every couple of days on the generators. The only way to enter its chamber, which is made of steel-reinforced concrete, is through a secure airlock that needs level 4 clearance or above to enter. Any detected unauthorized entry will result in termination to prevent containment failure, and anyone who wants to do testing on SCP-6959 is to be authorized by Director Lorenz. As for what it is, SCP-6959 is a mass of strange matter that resembles a Fumo plush of Cirno from the 6th game of the Toho series, Embodiment of the Scarlet Devil. The only difference is that it lacks the tag that would usually be located at its bottom. It is not known why the object looks as it does, or how it came to be, or where it came from, and why it was sent towards Earth. What is known is that due to its properties as strange matter, it is extremely dangerous to Earth, and if left uncontained, it could result in an XK class, end of the world scenario. Before you Alt F4, this isn't the first object capable of assimilating matter that could end the world. I remember there being many self-duplicating or matter-absorbing anomalies in early SCP. Conventional means of destroying the object have not yielded any results, and the only theorized way of destroying the object is to send it to a black hole, or to use paradimensional anomalies, which I guess means sending it to another dimension. It was discovered when a NASA drone reported it in 2009 and determined it was headed towards Earth. After a call to the Foundation, it was secured and contained in 2022. Okay, so there's not many changes to begin with, aside from the lack of the water that was to be used if things got out of hand, which used to be part of the old version's containment procedures. There wasn't really anything wrong with the first half of this SCP, so let's just keep going. Upon entering level 4 clearance, the page greets Director Lorenz himself and accesses the high clearance version of this file. The special containment procedures are pretty much the same, except it has been determined that SCP-6959 originates from the fusion of neutron stars RxJ1856.5-3754 and JTJ17855.2-3752. The strangelets resulting from that fusion is what we now have contained. Through utilizing procedure Merlin 184, it has been confirmed that SCP-6959 is not anomalous, but it has been declared by the O5 Council that it will not be granted an EX reclassification due to reasons seen in Addendum 6959-A. The true nature of 6959 will not be disclosed to anyone below level 4 clearance. Moving on to the addendum, we start with a statement explaining that what we will see are events that occurred during the research efforts to figure SCP-6959 out. The relevant characters here are Director Evan Lorenz and temporary co-director Everett Chalmers, the latter of which is in charge of documenting and interpreting information gained from research. Between a pair of emails, we see that Lorenz and Chalmers get along quite well, and this is not their first time working together to figure out an anomaly. Just another day at the Foundation. Let's hope another strange object won't strain their wills and relationship. Now on to the tests. First, they use acid on it. They then try using a flamethrower. The small bit of acid and the gas from the flamethrower don't do anything. It's assumed it's because of its durability or its absorption. Suspecting reality-bending shenanigans, Director Lorenz suggests testing a Scranton reality anchor on the object. And just to be safe, Director Chalmers suggests doing a cognitohazard test as well. After testing multiple SRAs and subjects with varying cognitohazard resistance, no changes or differences are observed. With no progress, it is decided that it's time to confront the creators of what this object resembles. We are given a SCP Foundation Agent Automatic Assignment Report. What follows is a summary of interviews done by field agents under the orders of Director Chalmers. Members with the Angel-type Dogen Circle are interviewed, but nothing comes of it. Then the designer and manufacturer of the first Cirno Fumo was interviewed, this time with more pressure. Nothing of worth was obtained. Finally, Zune himself is interviewed. After not getting anything of value for a while, Director Chalmers orders the agents to use enhanced interrogation. The agents challenge the order, but they allow it nonetheless. Nothing came of this, and Zune got amnesticized. We are then shown another set of emails. Director Lorenz reprimands Director Chalmers for his actions getting an innocent man tortured. Considering the lack of evidence, he believes that SCP-6959 is just a strange quirk of physics, and this may just be an explained anomaly. Director Chalmers disagrees and states that the Foundation's purpose is to protect the world from things that could end it, in addition to keeping them out of public knowledge, and if it takes torturing an innocent person, then so be it. Plus, they gave Zune medical treatment afterwards, so the ethics committee won't get on his ass. Furthermore, since he is more knowledgeable in science, he refuses to believe that the object is not anomalous, because strange matter is the original matter present at the start of the universe, and something as nonsensical as this simply cannot be normal, and its ramifications, if it is, would be catastrophic. As a last resort, considering the apparent desperation of the circumstances, Director Lorenz suggests calling up the Thaumaturgy Research Wing. There is a ritual reverse engineered from the Serpent's Hand they've called Procedure Merlin 184. We are shown a document for how it works. A photograph must be taken of the object one desires to test. Then one must draw a question mark surrounded by a circle on a surface that will not displace the chalk. Candles must then be placed in the pentagon, I assume where its vertices would be. The photograph must then be placed in the middle of the circle and is then to be bled upon. If the candles get lit, you've got an anomaly. If not, then it's not an anomaly. Director Chalmers expresses disdain towards the procedure, but since they're all out of ideas, Director Lorenz just goes ahead with it. The candles do not ignite. Director Lorenz suggests for an EX classification with more research on strange matter to be done. Director Chalmers rescinds the request. Director Rorans tries again, but it still gets rescinded. Through some emails, we see that Director Chalmers is losing his mind over the results. To be fair, I see the visual recognition aspect of the ritual perhaps being an area of uncertainty. Director Chalmers decides to take the reclassification up with the O5s, since Director Chalmers refuses to cooperate despite the lack of evidence to point that this is an anomaly. We are then given a transcript of a CCTV recording of Director Roran's office. While he's typing something, Director Chalmers barges in looking slightly disheveled. At first, they start to argue about the same thing they've been arguing about in the emails, but then Director Chalmers pulls out an actual Cirno Fumo. The point of this action is to point out the absurdity that the universe could produce such a thing on its own since the beginning of creation. When Director Rorans doesn't budge, Director Chalmers calls him delusional. Director Chalmers' madness continues with the implication in mind. He begins to demand to know if Zune somehow got subconsciously influenced or if there's some higher force pulling a prank on them. Director Rorans does not know. Director Chalmers continues, not being able to handle the ramifications of what this all means. He loudly wonders if this is what humanity was destined to create, and if humanity has peaked with the creation of the Fumo Cirno. Director Rorans answers with a resounding, maybe? Director Chalmers then asks him if he's suggesting that the perfect state of matter is an anime plushie. Director Rorans answers with an unsure yes. They get into a physical fight, but it gets broken up immediately by security. Finally, we are given a statement by the O5 Council. As we know, it has been unanimously decided that this will not become an EX. The reason being for the sake of finding more research about it, in addition to also finding a way to communicate the information without personnel losing their minds. Director Chalmers is undergoing psychiatric evaluation and will not be permitted to see this document for the time being. Now that we've reached the end, here are my thoughts. Doing a summary of this SCP doesn't really do it justice because there's a considerable amount of dialogue that contributes to this SCP, so I suggest reading this on your own. I should note that because I cannot access the older version of this SCP, I only have the video I made on SCP-6959 from last year to go off of, so I might miss some differences or make errors with attributing what I may see as improvements. My biggest issue with the version I saw last time was that the writing felt amateurish for reasons I unfortunately still cannot describe. This issue is thankfully no longer present, and this now feels like a proper entry into the SCP Wiki. The only remaining issue is with Procedure Merlin 184. On one hand, I've been reading SCPs for long enough to know that what we define as anomalous and non-anomalous can sometimes be unclear or arbitrary. I do not believe it's a common concept, but it has been covered a few times, and having such clearly defined boundaries for what is anomalous and what is not without any clear parameters stated really bothers me. On the other hand, we are told very little over what this ritual does. We are told the means to use it and the results, but we are not really told much else. The way it is set up makes it seem like they were asking someone or something, and I still have some suspicions over the effectiveness of the ritual, but there's some benefit of the doubt to give. However, if the purpose of this was to both assert that thaumaturgy would just give the same result while screaming at the audience that there's nothing anomalous here, then I feel like it could have been executed better. The pacing and the characters are all good. Honestly, everything else about this SCP is pretty solid, and I can't really say much about them, except maybe the chosen image should be stated to be a 3D model instead of a plush, since it's clearly a 3D model and not an actual plush, at least in this current version. Now, onto the public reception of this SCP. Nowadays, this SCP is received warmly by the community, with its upvotes being far higher than it was back then. When it first came out, it hit a pretty sore spot for many outsiders. There is a pervasive idea going around that modern SCP Foundation is nothing more than a power scaling competition with little care given to the horror aspect or writing. It is true that modern SCP is more varied in tone, and not every SCP is perfect, especially the old ones, despite the common opinion. As for what I think of the opinion that every modern SCP is a world ender, I have a few suggestions to the people who think that. 1. Please take a break from listening to long-form SCP content since world enders tend to be pretty long. I will mention that although the Exploring series in the Vulcan do occasionally cover this sort of thing, there's plenty of non-world enders covered by both. Simply put, just exercise some self-awareness because this may be a situation where it's not as common as it seems, but those few may seem like many since people seem to notice things that they do not like more than the things that they do. My second suggestion is to read the damn wiki. If you're not stupidly unlucky, you'll end up with a so-called rare non-world ending anomaly more times than you will not. To add to that, there have been many monsters and objects that could end the world, even before the modern SCP Foundation, and no one batted an eye at those. Plus, an SCP is more than the presented anomaly and its capabilities. It's also a story. So I would suggest not judging SCPs off of their versus battle wiki pages. And please, for those who are still complaining about redactions, it's been years. Get over it. It's not that big of a problem anymore. Now, where was I? Oh yeah. Even though SCP-6959 does not end the world within its story, it still left a bitter taste to those looking at it. There was also the thing where the Fumos were in their peak or around the decline shortly after this release, so that also rubbed people the wrong way. Even when that was over, the very fact that this is a modern pop culture item probably still triggers some people to this day. I will not go over the older criticisms provided by people I've seen online, but I will go over a common one I've seen as of recent. Some people do not get what this SCP is about. This SCP is not about seeing the world end in a funky way, and you cannot tell me that a naturally formed object made of theoretical substances that happens to look like a plush is not absurd. You cannot say that. You'd have to be insane to say that it's not weird. I mention that because some people believe that Director Chalmers is making too big of a deal. But the thing is, if this is going to be released to the public, we don't want responses like that to happen, especially to the smartest people in the world, you know? Anyway, the story may seem like it's going nowhere, but the point of this SCP is to make the reader question what it means for something to be normal and what it means for something to be anomalous, and how the Foundation decides to handle these situations when something is not anomalous while also not fitting into the human definition of normal. This SCP makes for a decent entry point into the subject of what normalcy means in the SCP universe. I'm honestly surprised that a few people missed the point of this SCP when it's pretty damn clear. And I do want to make a note that it's only a few, but I still figured it should be worth mentioning. Aside from that, this SCP is now just part of the bunch. Aside from all that occurred around this SCP, SCP-6959 is an all-around decent entry into the SCP Wiki. It's not spectacular, but the characters are alright, the pacing is good, and its execution is okay. I will admit that in hindsight, maybe my issues with the thaumaturgic aspect may not be as bad as I make it seem, but I also feel like this SCP could approach its concept more effectively. With how it stands currently, it makes for a decent article in the SCP Wiki. I know that what I'm saying about this SCP may not be too flattering, but truth be told, not every SCP is going to blow your mind. And that's fine. Not every article is going to be lore-rich or mind-bending. Sometimes you're going to get something that's kind of funky. This is basically a situation where people made a big deal over something that really wasn't worth getting riled up about. And luckily, it seems that people have realized that fact. I'm happy to say that the SCP community, for the most part, took this SCP maturely once it got more attention. My score for this SCP in its current state will be 7.1 out of 10. The 7 range based on my scale basically means that something is enjoyable despite its issues, but lacks more than what it presents, which is why I give it a 7.1, since this feels more like an introduction to a potential subject than a real deep dive. I know that 7 out of 10 for some reason has infamy as a score, but for those who feel that way, pretty much anything I give below 6 out of 10 is not worth your time, and I rarely give anything more than an 8 out of 10. So this is a pretty good score. Before I close off this video, there is one last thing I must say about this SCP. SCP-6959 succeeds in defying what we define as normal, both within the story and in real life. And surprisingly, it gained a similar reaction against it when it first got mildly viral. Whether we realize it or not, in the present day, people who know of the SCP Foundation have pretty much established expectations as to what a normal anomaly should be like. These expectations could be things such as everyday objects you don't think about doing things they're not supposed to, lanky, skinny, human-esque monsters, objects that look alien and geometric, and maybe even pop culture of times past. SCP-6959 resembles a piece of modern pop culture, while being a safe class capable of ending the world thanks to the power of theoretical science. A pretty unusual combination all around. While we may have disagreements over whether or not this SCP is our personal preferred cup of tea, I think there is one thing we can all agree on. Throughout the earth and stars, this Fumo alone is the strange one.